audience, we're going to cut the lights, so if you want to move your chairs around and face the wall, that'll probably help. We can share. All right, Aaron and I are going to tag team this a little bit. We thought we'd start with just a quick review. We didn't want to go over everything. We hopefully have educated enough of you in terms of the amount of revenue that we spend per student in this district. And so we weren't going to recreate the wheel. We just thought we would cut to the chase and talk a little bit about some of the priorities for us and then get right into where we're at today with the budget process. Go ahead, this is your slide, Eric.
Again, we know that for long term we can't rely on our local taxes to balance our budget. However, we also know that we can't afford to provide everything to everybody. We have to be able to balance this moving forward, as we do rely heavily on our local taxes, as the state does view Mill Creek as a wealthier district. However, we do have a lot of programs which do impact minimum amount of kids. So we have to understand our priorities and move forward. So in understanding our priorities, we have here provide a high quality education. We also want to maintain students. We have to upgrade our technology. We've talked about this again and again. We do plan on pursuing a lease for which you approved us to move forward on closing at the last meeting. We need the state to provide a budget. They provided a budget this year. However, we have a lot of unknowns regarding the 16-17 school year. Even with the current budget that they approved, they didn't approve a fiscal code in knowing how to allocate the funds that were even approved. So there's a lot of unknowns in the current year as well as moving forward. And without a baseline of the current year, it's difficult for us to make the transition into the following year, which I'm speaking about the 16-17 school year. We also need the state to address a fair funding formula. We heard Jay Himes here talk about how the state allocated their funds historically. There wasn't a fair funding formula. We know that the state also created a basic education funding commission which recommended a funding formula. That funding formula would work in our behalf, mainly because of our size. It's really providing a student count, or basically a per pupil cost, and it would work out in our benefit. And we also need the state to address the pension costs, as we know that pension costs continue to climb year over year. Looking long term, we have to invest in our buildings and our equipment. We've spent our bond money in areas where we felt were important as well as needed. However, long term, if we're looking 5 years down the road, we no longer have bond funds. Are we going to just plan on putting it in the budget that year? That's not the correct way of really looking long term. We need to be planning ahead. So in doing so, we would like to establish a capital reserve. We need to continue to build our fund balance. Our policy states, and again, it was just approved last meeting, our policy states the fund balance should be 8% of total expenditures. And if it's not, you have 2 years to get to 8%. What does that mean? It's about $7.7 million of where we should be. I'm speaking on unassigned fund balance. And currently we're sitting at $4.8 million. And then we also have the VOTEC renovations right around the corner. We've been discussing these renovations. The VOTEC needs to do the same thing that we did in McDowell, and we're responsible for 36% of that total cost, equivalent to be about $10 million.
So just a couple things just to highlight these bottom two areas here. The fund balance policy is something that we have to address. And we've been able to build that fund balance up to $4.8 million by being very conservative in our last two budgets. And that was something that we stated publicly. Part of our strategy was to be ultra conservative with those budgets so that at the end of the year, maybe we came out pretty decently. And we have done that. So that $4.8 million is a result of that. But again, that's not going to happen every year. We're going to show you here in a couple slides that we're really going to tighten the budget up a little bit and get a little bit more aggressive, which is sort of going away from our philosophy of being conservative. And I want to make clear to the board that that is a little change in what Mr. O'Toole and I and our administrative team have been working towards with the budget. We've been very conservative, but to try to make this work and try to be fair to the taxpayers and everybody, we're going to get a little bit aggressive with it, and we'll explain that in a minute. Then the other thing again, that VOTEC is not going away. I keep pointing to that. It's $10 million. I have no idea where that money's coming from, but I know in the next probably 2 or 3 years they are going to have to do something out there, and we're on the hook for 36% of it. So that's something we have to keep in the back of our mind when we're talking about raising taxes and generating revenue as a district, because we have to build our reserves. It starts with the fund balance and also the capital reserve account as well. Tom, you got that, Aaron?
All right, so let's take a quick sneak peek at our budget for this 16-17 year. Our medical cost increased by 1%, roughly about $150,000. That does require about a 3% increase in our rates, but the total cost of the district is about $100,000. This is a result of what the strategic moves the district has made over the past 5 years. We talked about in the last board meeting how our headcount's down. Roughly from, we'll say, 5, 8 years ago, had about 1,000 employees, sitting at 843. That's impacting our medical costs, as well as some of those who may have been full-time are now part-time. So a lot of the moves the district has made in the recent couple of years is we're starting to see the benefits now in our medical costs. Our salaries, it has about a $1.1 million increase in salaries. Tuition, we're looking at about a $600,000 increase in tuition. PSERS, we've discussed PSERS, that percentage jumped over 4%, for which we're responsible of half of. That's equivalent to about $1 million. And then we also included an IT lease for about $270,000.
Going back to the medical costs, again, part of our strategy for the last couple of years is getting people off of our payroll. We made the move with the food service a couple of years ago and got people off of the district payroll and over to Aramark. We also took a number of employees who work full-time in child development and in food service, made them part-time. So we're starting to reap the benefits of these lower costs. Those of you that have been on the board for a while know that we were budgeting probably about $600,000 for medical expenses, but we're starting to see that come under control now and almost flatline, which again is a result of our strategy to try to make this budget work and control expenses. The IT lease, as we've explained before, we need to replace all of our equipment. Basically, we need to replace it all, K through 12. We're going to start K through 8. We're going to do some targeted rollout of the Chromebooks and a one-to-one up in the high school, not a full one-to-one, but the priority is to replace the aging technology in K through 8, and we have that as a part of next year's budget with the 270.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, we will when we're done, okay?
Okay, so as Mr. Hall explained, we are becoming more aggressive in our budgeting. And here are the main areas for which we are becoming more aggressive in. Our earned income tax. You can see where we ended in the 12-13 year, to the 13-14 year, to the 14-15 year. We now have data that support us being more aggressive. So historically, we've been budgeting here about $7 million. Prior to the 12-13 year, you'd see this less than $7 million. So now we're going to be aggressive, and here's where we're budgeting at $7,120,000. We can talk about our real estate transfer taxes. As you can see, the numbers are what the numbers are. We're being more aggressive than $910,000. The one thing I will say with these two line items specifically is you can see, as we are continuing to decline, that people are moving into the district, driving our real estate transfer taxes, and that's also supported by the earned income tax. Now let's look at 3 state line items here. Our basic ed subsidy. We've talked a lot about our basic ed subsidy, as well as Jay Himes, and about how that's going to be allocated out, we don't know. We kind of need a fiscal code from the state in order to know what our total dollar amount will be. My understanding is we will get at least what we got last year, plus whatever the $150 million additional. We just don't know how that's going to be allocated out. Exactly how much we'll receive, we don't know. Special ed, we have here, we increased that by about $100,000. Again, we see that at $100,000. And then a ready to learn, I want to talk about, because that's kind of in with the basic ed subsidy, when you think about